All right, Nick, we're going to talk about another horror film today. We're going to talk about one that made me question a lot of things in my life and where I went wrong. And it's a film that's going to make you wonder, can an AI impregnate someone?
And it also makes you wonder if a title fits the story.
Yeah. Oh, man, we're going to get into that one in a second here as we cover Demon Seed from 1977, so stay with us. All right, welcome back to the show. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast, and thanks for watching, and thanks for subscribing and listening, and hit the comment buttons if you're interested. We do have a Patreon, so check out that down below. And today we're going to continue talking horror movies, and we're going to talk about the Demon Seed. All right, let's do it.
All right, Demon Seed. When Dr. Alex Harris creates Proteus, a supercomputer with artificial intelligence, he's unprepared to deal with Proteus's hunger for knowledge, understanding, and humanity. Proteus soon becomes enamored with Harris's wife, Susan, and the AI begins the horrific idea of having a child with her to continue its evolution and create a lineage.
Okay, so we do this classic thing in the 70s. Anytime in the beginning of a horror movie, you have to do this this landscape picture with ominous music playing, and then you have the credits, and it's supposed to entice mood, and then it doesn't really seem authentic the entire time we are in this movie.
I miss those opening credits because that was what I had hopes.
Well, they use that same kind of in the prelude to The Exorcist, I think.
Oh, in Dominion?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Something like that kind of shot, because it was, Exorcist is part of the 70s, and they do that. Anytime you talk about a demon or the devil and everything, you have to do, like, long landscape shots all the time.
Show how normal everything is first.
Yeah.
The opening reminded me of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Similar font choice. So I was like, okay, I think I know where we're going here.
Yeah.
Ouch, that hurts.
Today, this film actually doesn't get a lot of good reviews. It never did when it came out, and it's still, I think, my main criticism of it is authentically boring to watch.
You think about a story about an AI computer that's trying to have a baby, and you feel like, okay, like Short Circuit kind of did it a couple decades later to better.
Yeah, it did about 10 decades, like exactly a decade later.
It's so boring.
Yeah,
and it's unapologetically boring because you have someone like Julie Christie leading the film. You have Fritz Weaver, who I think is a really great character actor. And if he can sell Creepshow and The Crate from Creepshow, he can sell anything. Apparently not.
So you have two esteemed actors and actresses, Fritz Weaver and Julie Christie, who did remarkable work, and then they're in this movie. And then you have a cinematographer who went on to do remarkable work. This is Bill Butler. He did like The Godfather, he did Jaws, he did The Conversation. He went on to go and do Child's Play, which is kind of funny because Fritz Lang got an award for acting in a play called Child's Play. Too. But it's a concept that should have been a short film.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple ideas that maybe this film was not destined to work. And that's, if you know, first of all, what the movie is about, and then you hear it's called Demon Seed, that kind of just hurts. And I know that, like, it was based off a novel by Dean Koontz, but even look at this. Dean Koontz pulled the original version of the novel and restored it years later with better characters and a better overall, like, narrative choices. He actually, like, fundamentally reshaped the novel and re-released it. You can't even get the original one that this movie is based on in stores anymore. So even he knew that first novel wasn't that great. And then you get Robert Vaughn doing an uncredited voice performance as Proteus, and he telephoned his lines in because he was so uninterested in this project. And we're talking Robert Vaughn, Superman 3, horrible villain Robert Vaughn.
Yeah.
And even he's too bored for this thing.
Yes, and that's the thing. It's just too boring. Even though when you get the action, it's like, oh my God, we're going to do this. We're going to jump over the bed and miss lasers and stuff. So you definitely, which is funny, I'm going to have to say, there's a lot of misfires in this movie. But it's super. There's some kernels I really like about it. This is ultra modern, 70s modern film. Even with the environments, even with the office and everything. So if you want to encapsulate what the 70s thought would go with modern technology and architecture, I say this movie is like Troy McClure's horror movie. And I reference Troy McClure because, he's supposed to be a famous, that character in The Simpsons that was famous in the 70s in his house and everything. But this is kind of encapsulated what Troy McClure's horror is kind of like. The computer's running amok and everything, and you give responsibilities for machines, and then they're going to take over, and you're like, well, you dumb idiot, this is the consequences of letting machines do everything in your life and being kind of lazy.
Yeah. And I know I've been picked on for my theories about Prometheus and Alien Covenant, and how I don't think that the scientists in those films are that stupid, even though they do some stupid things. These are some really smart people in this movie doing some really stupid things. I mean, just not even talking about Susan, but she has a doctorate. Like, she's in a situation that it's tough to try and get out of. Yeah. Her husband creates an AI and has no idea what he's doing. And like, we've read enough science fiction to know that when you create an AI, you should create some rules for it. iRobot became famous for it.
You can write a program to govern it.
There's no rules governing this thing. It just decides, I want to learn about the world. I want to do things like Ultron. In 15 minutes, had more AI rules that he was willing to maneuver around than this guy did.
Ultron
in this movie.
Right. This is almost like Ultron. Yeah. And then, because you're really, the inspiration for this is definitely 2001.
Yeah.
Which was made 10 years before. And then you're trying to do a little bit, in the 70s, we did a lot of like demons and all that stuff, and the devil had his day for countless times. So I think you try to sell both to get interest, because there's two camps. You like the demon horror movies, and then you like the futuristic horror movies, even like sci-fi, like Logan's Run. You're trying to mesh that together, and it's just not going to work very well.
Yeah, it feels like the creators saw Rosemary's Baby and 2001 in a double feature, and they were like, I can do that, thinking they were the same movie.
With a dash of Logan's Run in there.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And I think it's funny that you mentioned that the film feels ultra-modern. It does feel, pretty close to what I would consider what 70s thinks 80s will be.
Yeah.
And I think it's funny that so much of the film reminded me of The Fly 2, because The Fly 2 is a lot more about like creating an offspring than The Fly 1 did. But The Fly 2 also like has this idea of what they think the ultra modern 80s should be. And the two films have very similar production.
I would agree, right? If you really want an interest of it, like Fly 2, where it went, it really like took this movie like, oh yeah, let's try to use a little bit like this, yeah. The director, Donald Kemmel, got actually started with his career called Performance, where he actually is a fascinating life. He grew up very bohemian in Europe, and then he hooked a latch onto friends with the Rolling Stones. And his first movie, Performance, actually features Mick Jagger in the movie as well.
Yep. I just stopped and looked at that poster when I saw it, because I was like, that guy looks like Mick Jagger. And then I was like, oh, well, never mind.
I think it's one of Mick Jagger's first movies to do. He would do the one in Australia later on. But yeah, and then it's a wonderful, fascinating life. The research, Donald Kemmel, who grew up in a very, very bohemian, artistic environment, and got onto the 60s counterculture and stuff like that. So
what's funny too is Donald Kemmel was attached to direct The Changeling at one point, a film we talked about recently.
You gotta be kidding
until he left due to creative differences. I had to literally stop myself and say, is that the same guy? When I was like doing some research on
what the hell would you have creative differences about with The Changeling?
But no creative differences to get you knocked off this thing.
No, right? You want to do.
Another fun fact I learned about this film was that Marlon Brando was apparently attached at one point. I don't know if he was going to play the lead scientist or if he was going to voice Proteus.
All options would be...
Or if he was going to play Susan. I don't know.
I would imagine he would love to just phone in his lines. He would love it. He would absolutely love it. Yeah, pay me $1 million and I would just phone in the speaking lines. I would take Robert Font's character, right? Yeah. Julie Christie really tries hard with this movie. I don't know. And then you strap her on a bed, and then she still tries to sell the movie. I give her accolades for working really hard to sell this movie, and take a slap from a kid too.
Yeah, and she's working so hard, because I know she's a great actress. I've seen great work from her.
Right.
And it's easy, and like she fits the role, purely being speculative about it. She fits the role. Like if I was a machine, I would probably fall in love with Julie Christie as well. But she can't work her way out of this ridiculous narrative. Yeah. And I think part of it too is that I really like the little like modular kind of ARM computer thing that's in the house with her that Proteus becomes, but it doesn't fit Proteus in this movie. Like it would have worked in another movie geometrically. It's a really cool like prop. it just doesn't fit this movie at all. And she's trying to act against this like triangle arm, you know, and it's really tough to do.
So there's just two different distinctions. There's that arm attached to the chair.
Yes.
Which they're trying to use as it's actually him, the machine actually physically using that as a vessel to physically touch and be human and to express sincerity and everything. But it looks so awkward.
Yeah.
It looks so, doesn't really sell. Like we said, Changeling has some ridiculous things to it that really sell it well. But here they has some really ridiculous things that don't really work very well. Like an extension arm that's supposed to be a manifestation of him trying to be human.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't work very well.
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen them utilize Proteus actually attempting to be human in other ways first. Because I don't think that inherently anyone, you know, or any one intelligence is born and then immediately says like, oh, I got the hots for her. Like, I would like to have seen more like, you know, kind of like a more trying to understand the younger kind of thing too, maybe playing a game, like doing something where like it would kind of develop almost like a human would with its artificial intelligence. Yeah. Because as much as it can move at the speed of sound, you know, it cures leukemia. So how come it struggles so much to keep her in a house? Like really, like it's almost like a too powerful villain that we don't really understand at all.
Right, and your villains can have too much power. We always talk about that, especially in writer workshops. And like Ultron or HAL in 2001, it's not so much them thinking they have to do evil, it's so much they think they have to correct things.
Yeah.
And that's something that we don't get from this, you know, Proteus, that he just thinks, oh, I'm a machine, I need to procreate. Well, you're starting from an infancy, right? Even when Hal goes back, he goes back to infancy. So there's no really stages. We don't see an evolution of the program all of a sudden leaping to what he wants to do. Which is, okay, you procreated. What's the next step? Yeah, we don't really know.
There's no real game plan to the character because Hal in a lot of ways does what he thinks is best to secure his mission. Yeah. And that's in a lot of ways similar to the androids from the Alien series. Is most of the time they're trying to do what's best for the mission. Yeah. And then even looking at Ultron, there's that joke that goes around Twitter all the time of like Ultron spent 15 minutes on the internet and realized I have to kill all humanity. Like that makes, you know, I get that.
But that's a writing.
Like it feels like it makes sense in all those stories. It doesn't feel like this thing is like I can figure out things, I can cure leukemia, but then somehow I'm not happy about this like fossil fuel trade. And so because of that, I'm gonna go have a baby. Like it's a very weird translation. I didn't understand how he fell in love and why he chose to fall in love. You know,
you're a machine and you're falling in love with an animal. Like, why don't you just fall in love with a bird or or something like that? It just doesn't. There's a lot of gaps to the story that don't make a whole lot of sense, and it doesn't. Now on top of that, you're a horror movie. That the title's wrong for what you are, but you're boring to watch.
Yeah. Like again, I put up with some real crap in my day. I have regularly watched Birdemic on like a regular basis because I think it is so ridiculously bad, but I can't not laugh at some of the badness of it. This is a movie that 90 minutes took hours to get through.
It feels like a strain.
Yeah. If I didn't have the due date of having to film it here, I'd probably still have it on pause in the living room and just like, I'll get back to it. Like, I need to take another break. Like, it was a slog to get through.
Now, the only thing that's interesting about this is you actually do have a good stunt of the machine bursting out of the basement.
Yeah,
and I think that was actually shot pretty well. That's pretty good, interesting. But for a kind of an entire movie where it doesn't really have anything doing, all they just have a dialogue exchange and a lot of exposition because you're having a machine taking over, so you have to have a lot of exposition. And you need a little bit of a sci-fi, so you need a lot of exposition. But then you get this dynamic, like, wow, this is great. You know,
there's there's moments of hope, and I think also like when Garrett Graham's character comes into play, where he's trying, you know, something's not right at the house, and he won't kind of leave things alone, and he keeps returning, and she's telling him, Walter, I need you to get out, like she's trying to protect him. There are moments in there where I'm like, oh, okay, I see where we're going here, and then it just diverts back away, and I think to myself, again, Garrett Graham is one of those guys that in his performances, not talking about his personal life at all, in his performances, he is able to sell a lot of crap. I mean, he's able to do in Child's Play 2 better than anyone else the convincing part that this doll is not alive and then is alive. He is a zombie in Bud the Chud 2, and he sells it with Robert Vaughn, mind you.
I remember.
And he's also in Terror Vision, where alien signals are coming out of the sky and turning people into monsters. He can sell it.
Yeah.
And he can't sell this one.
There's really nothing there to sell because it's a simple story.
Yep.
You get the entire story in the plot. You get this entire story in the log lines, for God's sakes.
Mm-hmm. Not in the title, but in the log line.
In the log lines, you get the entire story.
When it bursts out of the basement, I thought to myself, is it going to, because they kind of talked about how their home is kind of state of the art. You know, like it's got this interconnectivity to it. Yeah. It's got this idea of like where we're going to be now with our echoes and stuff like that, where we have all this interconnectivity.
Yeah.
It breaks out of the basement and it doesn't really take over the house in a way I thought it was going to. I thought it was going to get into all the wiring and do weird things with the phones and stuff. And it kind of does, but it kind of like, it does it in such a rudimentary way that if this thing is capable of curing leukemia in days, it should probably figure out how to take over the world pretty quick.
Yes.
And for the film, I mean, that we know at least a month passes. That much is guaranteed. And he still hasn't been like, he's like, I'm just going to hang out.
For something that can evolve fast, right?
Yeah.
And we're trying to navigate around it, but I think this is, and you said it, it's a very basic, it's still an infancy structured story that would evolve into people doing this, something like this even better.
Yes.
You see it even better. But this is kind of like a little bit of a kernel, like an infant stage of a story that we will see later on in movies.
Yeah. If this film were made 30 years later, it would be part of like Black Mirror, you know, about like how the horrors of technology and stuff, but it would be made with the idea of like having I almost feel like if you understood how silly it was and embraced that and maybe had fun with it to the detriment, I'm sorry to say, to the detriment of the adaptation of the novel, but just understood how silly it was and embraced it, the film could be fun and also weird because I can't imagine sitting in a pitch room and going like, so we're going to impregnate Julie Christie with a mechanical baby. Like, I can't imagine how that pitch meeting would have gone.
But I think they want to continue with that, you know, like a Rosemary's Baby. We want to set a mood, tone, and theme, and we want to take our journey until all of a sudden you have this ending. Yeah. But you do it so flat. Mm-hmm. And so there's nothing really, there's no appeal to it. Like we have Rosemary's Baby, we have a little bit of mysteries and kernels and things are we seeing things for what they are or we're not? You know, there's a little bit of hysteria, a little bit of like, you know, delusions and stuff like that played into the movie. Here we just get it straightforward. And if you play, and I don't mind things being straightforward, but you have to have some kind of interesting component. We don't really get a background to any of the characters. We don't even get a background to Proteus at all. We just all, hey, I got this machine. This is his brain. He looks like the brain from Forbidden Planet, and off we go.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, we don't get Susan. We don't get Alex. Like, we get a hint that there's something in their past, and they kind of reveal it a little bit more as the film plays out. But it's not enough to clamp onto at any point. I was very confused at the beginning where they were talking about like, are they separated?
I thought so too.
Is she moving out? Is he moving out? Right. Who's moving where? What's going on there? Like, there's so much of an easier way to do this show don't tell style of storytelling than trying to just jam like all of the novel. Because I get the feeling that they took like, well, they have to be separated because of this event in the novel, and he has to leave for a while, but she's going to pack up her things and move, and then he's going to come back to. You don't need to do that. I'm sorry to say, but any novel readers, if you're making this into a movie, cut that part down to like one sentence.
I agree.
Of he's moving out, and that's it. Like that's it.
Like they did with Ultron. He read the internet. Oh crap.
Yeah, I gotta murder people.
Right. I actually put it in my notes. If they would just change the characters a little bit, like Julia Christie and Kristen Weaver, a little bit acting a little more mechanical in the relationships, a little more non-human, that would entice the motivation for Proteus to interject himself into that relationship. Yeah. But they don't do anything like that. There is no like blending. Mm-hmm. It's all of a sudden, okay, I got the hots for you. And they do a really good spin-off on The Simpsons where Pierce Brosnan is in charge of the house and he all of a sudden has the hots for Marge. And I do love that. And that's a play from this movie. Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, The Simpsons, they knew about 70s and 80s horror.
Yes, they were in right, yeah.
But I felt the same way with when we have like Proteus like encasing her in the house. Because when I realized like, oh, that's our story. That's what we're doing here is like she's stuck in the house.
Now we gotta start.
I was thinking to myself, is she going to get Stockholm Syndrome? Like, is she going to start connecting with her captor in a way? Because he's there and if he knows everything. Again, I'm always going to go back to this. If he can cure leukemia in a couple days, he probably can manipulate someone into doing whatever he wants. Right. He probably has studied up on psychology and can convince her to like believe what he's doing is right. Mm-hmm. And they kind of shoehorn a little bit of that into the end, or maybe I'm just reading into it. I don't know. But I felt like that was the story we were going to, was that she was going to be like Stockholmed into like believing what he was doing was right, and that was going to be where the Fritz Weaver character was going to come into the middle of things. Like, there's all these things like we thought about as watching this movie, going like, what if they're going to do this?
What if they do this?
And then,
And that happens with when a story doesn't really work out or flush very well. When the audience thinks, "Oh, maybe I can do something like this. Maybe I would have done this," and then that takes away.
Yeah, there's a difference between what if this happened and I would have done. Like, you know, what if is fun to ponder after the film is done. I would have makes you don't ever want to go back to it.
Yeah. So, and it was, I think, after this movie, it took a long time for Julie Christie to recover from, because there was a lot of remarks and a lot of reviews of like, what are you doing? I know Gene Siskel was adamant about, very adamant and very just, you know, almost to the point to discuss, why did you take this movie, Julie Christie? You have far more credibility than this.
Yeah.
So
at the same time, y'all got to work.
But she's great in the movie Afterglow.
Okay.
She got her in, like, from '97, which is fantastic.
I think she recovered nicely enough, but yeah, it stinks when you. I got to assume she took the role at least thinking it could be something. I mean, again, everybody's got to work. I get it. That's totally cool. But I get the feeling that when you pick a project, you still want to pick something you believe in. And she had enough clout where she could have picked something she believed in. So there must have been some kernel that she really thought could work in this movie. Yeah. And it must stink to just put all of your hard work and effort into it and have the film just completely pooed out on you. Yeah. You know, this film is not strong enough to match its performers.
No, and there's a really lot of good stuff that came out in '77 for it to just kind of be ignored.
Yeah, I think even if this film was great, it probably would have suffered because a month later we had Star Wars. Like, I think a month later, you know...
Everybody forgot about this movie about technology.
Sorry, sci-fi.
Yeah.
We got robots.
You know? Sorry, forget. And then we have androids. They're not interested in you.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, they can sell Space Wizard a month later, but we couldn't sell a robot arm.
All right. Have you seen the Demon Seed? I don't know why they don't... Why don't you just call it, like, Machine Seed or something?
I was convinced that the film was called Julie Christie is the Demon Seed, because that's how all the posters sell it. They put her name as part of the title.
Right, they did.
And I was like, is that actually the title?
Wait, is she the Demon Seed? Right.
Yeah, like I had some trouble finding the movie because I kept typing in Julie Christie is having the Demon Seed.
That would be a great story. You interject her and she hacks the system and she becomes the she becomes the injected.
Yeah, call us for a remake. We're here.
We do writers' workshops.
But until that time, you can comment, tell us your thoughts on the movie. Have you seen it? What did you think about it? I'm sure you have some.
There's a lot of options to go through.
There's a cult following for this movie, so convince us why we're wrong. If you love this movie, we'd love to hear about it. And don't forget, while you're at it, subscribe and like Nick pointed out too, join the Patreon. We have some great patron things going on that site.
Do a movie like
and
this
then you could maybe pick a better movie.
Or we continue to do movies like this anymore.
Yeah,
a lot of options.
We're always open to it. Join patrons like Brian Eggert by clicking on that link and checking out the Patreon. Tier start as low as $1, and from $5 and up, you can help us pick our monthly choices for patron-selected movies. Yes. So consider that. And until next time, you can find all my film reviews on goatfilmreviews.com.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast, and I still regard 70s sci-fi as the best sci-fi.